So want to actually do a little bit of investigation as to what this plant actually wants. So for example, yes, next slide, please. This another type of plants growing outside, so not epiphyte, is a lithophyte. We're growing on rocks. There we go. So you'll see that the plant up there at the top is, you see that big crack on the rock there? That clearly is what the plant is being attracted to. And you can see leaves all around there. So the detritus is coming down and basically almost making a media or pseudo soil out of the detritus that's coming down off the leaves above. Yet the roots of this plant would be deep down in that rock. So even though this plant is very clearly exposed to some intense sun, it also has its feet pretty damp or cool all the time. And this is can be sometimes tricky with some of the lithophytic Lalias, is that they want warmth and a lot of light, but they also kind of want their roots to be cool, not necessarily wet, but cooler, and maybe even a damp from time to time, as would happen with dew during the winter or during the nighttime. But again, much like we saw with the epiphyte, a lithophyte is still going to have multiple different environments, as we see with the path down there on the bottom right. That is clearly in a rock face with overhanging plant life above it, and it is probably going to be, there's probably going to be water cascading down that rock face pretty regularly, just kind of seeping from up the hill, giving that I think it's a dianthum, I think maybe. That's going to be giving it a lot of moisture and probably also a lot of fertilizer. Natural fertilizer coming down from up above. So again, even with, like, say, lithophytes, the environment that you're putting it in is very important. Next slide, please. And also xerophytes. So generally referred to as desert growing. There are a couple here. This one's growing on a rock, and then there's another Rapiculus lalia growing out of the rocks. So just to give you kind of a reference as to how so many different orchids grow. And you see with these, the lalia here, you see that kind of grayish color to the leaves. That usually is indication that it gets a lot of light. Usually a grayish color like that is basically acting as a natural sunscreen. You'll also notice this with air plants too, by the way, that the ones that have that kind of grayish skin, don't really water those because they don't like it, because they want to be dry and hot. But then you see the others here. I think this might be an encyclia, I'm not positive, but you see how it's using basically its little pseudobulbs as almost like energy tanks to survive through what is clearly a very harsh environment. Next slide, please. And then terrestrials. Huzzah. So mostly you got some habanerias. I've got a cavachii, which I'm still waiting for mine to bloom. And then a couple of cymbidiums up there. So even then, even amongst your terrestrials, you've got a lot of different environments going on. The cavachiis, for example, because they're in such dense underbrush, the seedlings, as I'm growing some from seedlings, they want it quite shaded and damp. And then as the plant gets older, it wants more and more light, because the plant would be emerging from basically all the other plant life around. This one is in a clearing, so just so you can see it very nicely. Habanerias also are tuber that go dormant during the winter. And well, cymbidiums, frankly, some of those are almost bulletproof, except for the ones that I killed on my porch this last winter. I didn't realize it was going to be 18 below, or 18 degrees for extended period of time. So anywho, so knowing what kind of, again, what environment, I'm just going to keep harping on this, is important for how you treat a plant. Next slide, please. And terrestrial. That was the other part of the announcement that I wanted to make. If anybody wanted to make any part of the group orders from Burnt Bridge Creek, this is one of the plants available, and it's really cool. So I think it's Ceropagia, I believe. So that is again where you have different kind of open growing terrestrials like those, but those are more bog and grassland plants that are going to get a lot of moisture at certain times of the year and also nothing but sun, but they also die back during the winter. Next slide, please. So how does it grow? So this means how you should treat it. So if you happen to have a hybrid that you want to mount, it's important to look up what the parentage is. If it's a primary cross of like a catasetum and a catasetum, most likely one of the parents is probably going to give you a good idea, but it's always good to just take the time. Googling things is free, at least for the moment. See where it comes from. Go to the Internet Orchid Species Photography Encyclopedia. Go to Orchid Roots if it's a hybrid. And you can see what the parentage is, what the parents like, and therefore how it grows. The Orchid Species Database will tell you where it's from. They will tell you what kind of forests it's found in. If you want, you can always type in the name of the plant, if it's a species, and then just put that little phrase right there in there, and you will most likely see the plant where it is naturally growing, and that gives you also a really good idea of what it likes. Next slide, please. So a few examples. Thank you, Charles, for providing me with some pictures. It is very helpful. So you can kind of see by this Dendrobium farmeri, this plant clearly developed growing on the side of a tree like this, because look at those roots. Look how it is curving to every single angle of that piece of wood and basically anchoring itself as best as it can. Also, whenever that tree gets any sort of rain, it's going to be coming right down the trunk of that tree or the limb or whatever it may have attached itself, and is going to basically run down all these roots here and slowly moisturize them all, so it can absorb as much moisture as it can while there's still that rain, before the winds and the cloud breaks start to dry it out completely. So therefore swelling the pseudobulbs and bringing about these wonderful blooms. So you can very much see that this type of dendrobium loves being in trees and therefore on mounts. But that is if you can provide the kind of environment that you naturally find that in. A lot of people grow dendrobiums in pots because they can't hope to simulate what it would actually look like in those forests. Charles can, because I've seen his greenhouses. Next slide, please. Also, you can see this guy as an oncidium, even with small roots, it's still attaching itself with all its might to this mount. Some of the roots are very clearly dangling. Those are collecting moisture from pretty much every passing cloud that it can get its hands on or its roots on. And yet some are very clearly anchoring it to the tree itself. And a lot of orchids will do this where they have roots that are made to absorb moisture, and also roots that are basically gathering air. They're air roots, so the plant can breathe properly. And so you'll have huge mats like this, and you'll see with this spacilatum that how the pseudobulbs are growing and how it moves itself a little bit away from the bark here. That's where you're also going to get different leaves and other detritus that is going to build up, where the plant will start to make its own media, / it will start getting the nutrients from that detritus and developing its own natural fertilizer. Next slide, please. Also, this is one I learned about a while back. Sometimes you'll mount a plant because you'll see like it growing in the wild, and it'll be on the side of a tree, and you'll be like, I'm gonna put it on the side of a piece of bark. And the legendary Bill Toms in one of his brought this up, that he was looking at a picture of a bulbophyllum in the wild, and he looked at the picture for many years and never figure out why his wouldn't bloom. And he had them mounted just like they were in there. And then he looked closely at the picture, and there was multiples of the plant in the same tree. The ones that were sitting on top of the branches were blooming, and the ones that were on the side of the tree were not. So he took all his mounts and turned them horizontally, and the plants started flourishing. Because plants can hold on even in environments that they don't necessarily prefer. But if sometimes you'll take something that may be set vertically and turn it horizontally, the plants start going crazy, because that's actually how they would prefer to be growing. So this one was clearly mounted by Charles the correct way, because that's why he's holding it. You can see little wires there holding it horizontal. So again, look at pictures. It's fun to look at pictures on the internet. It's also free, like I said. So next slide, please. This one, I do believe he brought this in. He did. So just for example, you can very clearly see in this picture and in this example here, and you can examine this closer after the presentation, that this was very clearly growing in a 4-inch square pot, you can tell. And he has attached it with, did it have twine on it, Charles? Yeah. Yep. Yep. We'll go over that here in a second. So clearly attached with here, but the plant has since attached itself like cement to this board. And you can see it in the pictures there, how the roots have just adhered themselves there, and it's even greater since I got the picture. So I think this picture was from last year, I think. And since then it's done even more, and it still has, you know, the bits of bark in there, because honestly, there's tons of live roots there. And you don't want to disturb live roots just to get a little bit of bark out. The plant's doing just hunky-dory. Yes, Tyler. I will check the tag. It is macrophyllum, Dendrobium macrophyllum. And it is healthy. Lord, is it healthy. So you can see how quickly that plants can adjust to a new environment like this. Again, Charles in his greenhouses has simulated the growing environments of some Asian growing orchids in a near scientific perfection type of way. Sorry, Charles, I'm going to talk you up a little bit here. Next slide, please. And he brought this one in as well. It's looking even better. He did not bring this entire tree in. The picture on the left is a Sologeny or a Catasetum growing in the wild. And I just wanted to show you this picture because you can see the moss where it's going to be as moist as possible running down the tree on the top. And you can see where it comes together. That's exactly where this Catasetum has decided to take up residence. And it's because it wants, when Catasetums are growing in their active growth cycle, they want all the sun, they want all the moisture. So in the rainy season, with all that water coming down the tree, it's collecting as much as it possibly can and making that suitable fat as it can so it can bloom. Charles has also done an excellent job with this one here that is clearly in active growth. It's dropping some roots here. It's also sending some roots out to attach to the bark, but it is looking spectacular. The new growths are amazing, and I wish I was as good with catasetum as that one is. But that's why we're all here, to learn, isn't it? Next slide, please. And just a little aside, something I am getting better at growing. Banda falcatas, formerly Neophonetia falcata, which some people are still upset about. But you can see how they grow in nature. Again, very much like the catasetum at the notch of a tree where basically water would become dripping down. And so it would dry out a little bit slower than the rest of the tree branch, say if it were a little bit farther down. And how it's been grown since, you know, late 1500s, early 1600s by the Japanese in these little pots here. So very different, but same kind of idea of grown in moss, so it absorbs much moisture as possible and then slowly dries out, much like the tree. Next slide, please. So again, to harp on the orchid roots and the Internet Orchid Species picture encyclopedia, is to research your plants because they will be happiest that way. And if you can simulate their environment, awesome. Mount them, make it happen. They'll be happy, you'll be happy, and you'll be able to show off how you took a plant out of a 4-inch square pot, attached it to a piece of wood, and amazed everybody, and also provided yourself blooms, and then you patted yourself on the back and said, how awesome am I? So search your plants. And if I've learned really anything over the pandemic, it is, which I learned a lot, it is to do that research. It's really not that hard to do. Just there's a tag on your plant, look it up. You can even like kind of guess at it sometimes, like when you get, say, a Trader Joe'ensis or something like that. Most hybrid Phalaenopsis want the same kind of culture. Most hybrid Oncidiums generally want the same kind of thing. It's species that get kind of fussy and picky, and they know what they want, and by Lord, they're going to get it. Next slide, please. So the I just threw this up here because the in situ or in situation, original situation, is a great way of seeing exactly what kind of thing your plants wants, because you have everything from the super wet cattleyas to the super dry, the you know, rock growing paths to the ones that are just smattered all over this tree, to the paths that decide, like, you know what, this cliff hanging over this creek, great spot. And you know, sometimes hell, just sitting on a rock's going to be fine for that Laelia. So orchids can put up with a lot, except for ice. That's why they're not in Antarctica. Said it before, say it again. Next slide, please. All right, on to mounting stuffs. So if someone would take the lights up at least a little bit, because we're going to start going through examples of different kinds of mounts. So we're only going to be half using the slides now. I brought a lot of different kinds of mounts, and just to show you kind of the things that I do, the things I've seen other people do, etc. Also, if anybody needs a bag of medium grade bark mix, let me know, because we have some. I forgot was in here. So probably one of the most classic of mounts is just your little cork mount. It's originally an oak, which I learned from Michael Novotny a lifetime ago. And so this, you know, stoppers your wine and whatnot, but it is exceedingly durable, and that's why it is so often used for orchid mounts, is that it doesn't have any harmful properties to orchids. It lasts a long time. It takes a while, a good long while, for it to disintegrate under the harsh conditions of always being watered, roots trying to tear it apart, etc. But it works great. However, it does have to usually be imported, and therefore can be kind of expensive. There are only a few things that orchids do not like to grow on, and I forgot to write them down, but let's see what else I got. So this is one of the big chunks of fir bark that have from time to time. Charles loves mounting stuff, so he often will have some of these about. But here is just a chunk of cedar that I found in my neighbor's wood pile, and it works perfect. Also, sometimes you can just find little bits of wood in the wood pile. And as long as you generally know what it is, you can check to see if it's okay for orchids. And more often than not, it is. Some people really like to use driftwood. A note on driftwood. If you're getting driftwood from a river or freshwater source, just make sure that you clean it real well. Maybe spray it down with some Fizan or something. Basically, you don't want any nasty germs or bacteria growing on your orchid. So just clean it. Don't bleach it, just clean it. Spray it down with some Fizan, something like that. You can also do it in some water with some hydrogen peroxide. Orchids love hydrogen peroxide, at least a small amount. So you can always do that. If it's salt water, if it is saltwater driftwood, take the driftwood and soak it in a bucket of fresh water, not once, not twice, but thrice, and leave it for about 5 days to a week. Dump the water out, rinse and repeat, and you can pretty much get all reasonable salt out of the bark. But some people don't even trust that. So, I mean, much like how many orchids there are, there's many orchid growers and also as many of opinions on what is safe, what is not. I've done driftwood many a time from salt water after soaking it like that, and I've had no ill effects. If you ever get anything from Andy's Orchids, you are going to wind up most likely with some grapevine. If you know anybody that's taken out an old grape bush, go chat them up, because grapevine is fantastic. It lasts really long time, much like cork, and orchids love it. I don't entirely know why. I'm sure there's some science behind this. I'm sure that someone here could probably educate me on it, but it works wonderfully and it's very durable. And I've been holding on to this one since it has this little L shape for an orchid to sit on for a while, and have yet to dedicate an orchid to it. But someday, perfect mount for something. Grapevine. Grapevine. Yes, you can. In fact, quite a few things for lizards also are really great for orchids. Sometimes they'll have sphagnum moss. They'll have cork rounds. And it's sometimes, if you buy something that is marketed towards orchids, it is super spendy. If it's marketed towards your gecko, not so much. So just something to keep in mind. What slide are we on? Are we still on a slide? Isn't that stuff with all the holes in it? No. Let's try it. Okay, I've done a bit of that. Okay, I've got a couple things mounted on it because it's hollow. That it's lasted a while, but again, depending. Okay, excellent. Manzanita. So if you've got any manzanita available, use that too. Also, pots. This is something that I think that sometimes gets overlooked with mounting, is that sometimes you'll have something that needs, it would prefer to be mounted, but it wants a slower drying out period. So say something that's your lithophyte. Sometimes putting it in a terracotta pot is ideal because the terracotta wicks the water out and so it dries out a little bit faster, but it really doesn't want to sit on anything. It wants airflow below it as well. So I'm sure that probably a few of you have seen like the orchid clips that clip onto your plant that have a little hook on one side, and then this part goes over here, and so you can hang a pot thusly. Okay. Orchid supply stores carry these. They're redonkulously expensive, like $2 a piece or something like that, with some good like 10 gauge wire. I made this one. So just, you know, your needle nose pliers and some galvanized wire like that. Works great, because then with your orchid hanging like this, it can completely drain. It's going to dry out fairly quickly, but it's still going to have that media that's around it that will dry out even slower, but it will still dry out faster than your other plants that say are sitting in trays or lower down or have a lot of moisture around them. So that's something that I've found, that some things that were too fussy and dried out too quickly with mounting, and yet really didn't like being in plastic pots. It's a great option. It's a fun thing to play with. A couple notes on, tree fern fiber. That's the one I didn't bring with it here. This is tree fern fiber here. It currently is a little harder to find than it used to be. It is spectacular for some kinds of bulbos, some pyrothalids, some strapia, that kind of thing. It breaks down medium quickly, but the way it holds moisture is almost like holds moisture a little bit like a sponge, especially at the bottom of it. So it can be really great for some of those plants that are epiphytes that do grow on the side of moss covered trees. Okay, next slide, and then we'll get right onto this demonstration. So I used to use, when mounting orchids, I used to use a lot of fishing line. And slowly I started noticing exactly how much fishing line I was going through, and I started feeling bad about myself, because even though it's very durable, I'm putting a lot of that into the trash when I'm changing it out, anything like that. It's not going anywhere. It's fishing line. I think personally, I think we've got enough of that. So I've been experimenting with a few different things. So there's contractor wire, which is nylon, so it's plastic, but not quite as bad as fishing line. This lasts pretty much just as long as your fishing line. It's super durable. It's super cheap, and you can get it in pretty much any color you want. Or if you want to be really environmentally conscious, which why not if given the option, this is very earth friendly jute twine. And I learned this from Charles, again, thank you. So if you basically wrap up your plants in this, unless you're specifically trying to hold moss around the plant, for that, maybe use the contractor's twine. But if you're just trying to get a plant that actually attaches itself to the bark of the tree, use this, because it's going to disintegrate in just a couple years, maybe longer, depending on how moist your environment is. And at that point, the plant's attached to the bark anyway. It doesn't matter if it falls off. If the plant falls off at that point, well, it didn't really like whatever kind of wood that was on anyway, so you need to change out the wood anyway, because it doesn't want to touch that wood for whatever reason. So I really like this. I've been using it for a while, and I've had nothing but good results. So there's my little environmental spiel. You're welcome. Also, just a quick note on tags. I've been experimenting with all sorts of different things. I've used a fine point Sharpie. I've used a industrial grade Sharpie. I've used ink pen. I've used pencil. And in my experience and on the advice of one legendary Leonard Gines, a number 2 pencil is in fact the longest lasting thing that you can use. In fact, they are so good that the Oregon Orchid Society endorses them with these very nice purple pencils, along with tags for your convenience. So I've been pretty much rewriting all my tags as I've been repotting with pencil, and I got nothing but great things to say about it. So of course, again, there's a lot of different opinions out there. And there's a saying that goes something about opinions, but I don't remember it right now. Next slide, please. All right, there's a mountain of moss. I don't have that much moss with me today, but I do have a lot. Moss. So there are a few different kinds of moss in the world. There's a lot of different kinds of moss in the world, but for the purpose of mounting orchids and orchid growing, there is Chilean, there's Chinese, and there is New Zealand. Both the Chilean and the Chinese stuff is completely usable. It's probably around most of your Trader Joe's Phalaenopsis. It's fine, but it does break down faster than the New Zealand stuff. New Zealand stuff is spectacular. It also smells really nice too. Maybe it's just me. But this is it, and it's got some pretty long little strands. It's not, they're come in different grades. AAA is fantastic. And if you're mounting Vanda falcata or potting Vanda falcata, you probably want the 4A stuff. That's really long. It's also the price tag is as long as the strands are. So I make do with this, and my plants aren't angry at me. So you want some of that, and the society buys it in gigantic 4-kilogram bales, compressed, all dried out. So if you need any, let us know, because it's going to be a whole lot cheaper than buying little tiny packages of it online. I can guarantee that. So before I get all sorts of into mounting something, does anybody have any questions?
Hear a lot about live.
It's about, I've never used it myself. I have never heard that it had any like supremely better benefits. I mean, maybe it provides some micronutrients to the plant, but I know you can find it about, and sometimes I'll see posted online. Even a few members of this society have posted stuff about like, ooh, look at this live sphagnum moss. It's all green and growing. And I look at it and be like, yeah, I'm envious. I want some of that just because. But I've never actually used it myself. Has anybody used live sphagnum moss? Okay, so it likes it cooler, probably. Okay. Well, how fun. Okay, well, there you go. Yes, Charles.
Bakers published those books, books that hold back pictures, but for every species of the book, there was a big chart on the local weather each month of the year. And so you could get those paper books, or you could order individual colors $20 for the dollar. And have some really useful information about precipitation, when it happens, how much, and chemicals throughout the year. That can make a difference. So that's another research.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, no. Place, day, understanding.
All right. Yes.
I love moss and all the trees are coming in up here, and I tried that as a beginner. And a lot of times you're gonna bring bugs in. When you do that, but if you're trying to grow it in your house, it's not gonna be the same as the moss that grows outside of the park. So even if you put it on top of pots, in my experience, it doesn't work. I don't know if anyone else has me.
I've tried. We are all moss killers. Yes. Absolutely. And more than that, when you get sphagnum moss that's been dried and compressed, don't try to tear it apart to get it wet. Take a like kind of loosely whatever you think you might need, go a little bit less than that because it puffs up so much, and put it in like a bucket or something, and then pour water on top of it. Just let it soak. It will absorb all that moisture, and that's when you actually want to start kind of gently feathering it apart, because otherwise you're going to break those really great long strands. And it'll just start degrading faster. So with the stuff like this, it kind of off of the huge 4-kilogram bales, it just kind of peels apart like paleo dough, just in layers or croissants. And you can just take basically a slice of that and set it down in the water, and then it just like over an hour or two goes and just makes that sound too, by the way. And just absorbs all that moisture, and then you can kind of tease it apart, and it comes up with this great stuff here. Yeah, because you want as long strands as possible. Yes, Tyler.
Yeah, wool.
Wool? I don't know. I wouldn't be inclined to say no, just simply because it would start growing probably like moss or bacteria or something. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Yeah. Try it and let us know how it goes, because I'm curious. You never know. Like sometimes there are kooky things. I think there are later in the presentation that I didn't go over. There are some kooky ways of potting some plants. That carpet pad. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you can grow things on carpet pad. I know a while back, it was all the rage for very large, like cattleyas and lalias and whatnot, to add chewed up car tires in with them. That was very popular for a while because it just doesn't degrade, and I don't know why that stopped, if it has, but we are very lucky here in the Northwest to have such access to such great fir bark, because it is not the case everywhere in the country. So any other questions? I've never done it. I don't have a ton of limestone just around in my backyard, but I'll look into it. Yeah.
Got a small ridiculous land from somebody who had it mounted on a rock, but it was in poor condition, and I ripped it off and potted it, and it started to rot out of it. So that's all I know. You know, you're gonna want to go see rock wool.
Oh yeah. 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 How do you know that, Skip?
Because there used to be a place out where I lived, and so growing supplies, and that's where I got the dead pots.
Excellent.
And I had all these little wedges.
Mhm.
What do you do with those? This is all I have.
Yeah. So rock wool, best way to describe, it's almost like fiberglass, isn't it? Yeah, spun glass. And what you can actually, a lot of hydroponic stores use it for starting plants. And you can actually very easily get it at like Grow Generation. I've never tried it myself. But if you ever happen to find yourself out Tigard Way, stop into Grow Generation. They're really nice folks out there. If you ever desperately need some Purelight, they also have the right grade of Purelight. I've gotten free grow lights there because they were discontinuing them. And they also have some really, really great pots as well. And they give discounts to the Oregon Orchid Society. So in case you need, also out Oregon City Way, American Agriculture is also excellent. And they also give us a discount. Also concentrates. If you need small grade Purelight, they're great. What's that? They moved up to Oregon City Hilltop area. It's just, do you know where Clackamas Community College is? Throw a baseball from there and you basically hit it towards Oregon City. So, but yeah, they got a new space, and yeah, they used to be over on Stark, over by Mall 205, but not anymore. If there's not any more questions, I'll start the demonstration of mounting. Any? Okay, here we go. So what we're going to actually mount today is I'm going to do a Phalaenopsis. And the reason is that, well, had a bunch of them that got donated to the society, and it's in active root growth. So it has the best chance of adhering to this bit of fir bark. Also, if you have something that's growing on fir bark and for some reason, despite your best efforts, the cat gets to it and kills it or something, you can reuse these. Just give them a good scrubbing with a bristle brush, a coconut bristle brush, and they're pretty much good to go. You can soak them in a little bit of water with like a tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide if you want, but honestly, this is probably fine. But you know your own growing environment best. So what you really want is to, like, a plant just needs kind of its roots teased out a little bit. And so when you're transplanting something from a pot to a mount, it's most likely that some of the roots are going to like the change and will die away. This one has mostly good, like healthy roots, and also it's a Phalaenopsis hybrid, so it has vigor out the nose. So when we actually like get this on here, and if possible, when you've got something like this, get it outside with your hose, the sprayer, and clean off all the little tidbits of dirt and whatnot. The plant will just be happier. It'll look prettier. You'll be happier. It'll be happier. Everyone will be happy. So when getting the I've gone over this the other I think last meeting, but try to get as much off as you can, but not at the risk of damaging the roots. you don't really want to risk root damage because roots are precious. They take up water, and you don't want to take anything out of there. I just discovered, by the way, these kind of clippers. They're from a company called Q Yard. And I am in love with them. And it was like $20 for the set of them. So there's my little promo for a company that I know nothing about. But just gonna get rid of some of the little stems there. This is growing, it's trying to grow 3 leaves at one time. I don't know why. It looks like it's trying to grow an oncidium out of the top of the Phalaenopsis. I have no idea why that's happening, but maybe it wants to. I don't know. Maybe it's turning into a different plant in the multiverse. So that's going to be just fine there. I also like mounting some Phalaenopsis because it really helps avoid crown rot. So it's not going to be water sitting inside there because it'll be at a little bit of an angle. So got your mount here. I'm making, or if you've got a mount, sometimes there'll be a secondary hole to loop the twine or string or whatever it is that you're using through. This one does not have it. So I'm just going to go kind of at the base around where the plant is going to go. I'm just going to do a quick loop. And so one of the things that I like to do is give a little bit of extra towards the end, because sometimes I'll tie it off there. Some people are real concerned about exactly how tight this has to be. Like it needs to be that terrible tight to hold it on here, because you're really just trying to hold it to the wood. So I think something like that is plenty. I could get my finger in there if I wanted to, but it's not cinched in there too tight. Again, okay, so that's where you do actually usually need something. So this I think is 14 gauge wire. I want to say it's pretty thin. It's hard enough where it'll hold the plant, but I can't easily bend it with my fingers. I can, but not easily. So it's kind of, you have to just test with your finger. So how I like to do it is generally start with a straight-ish piece. Yes. So generally I'll put a hole through it. There's not really much way around that unless you have cork. Sometimes you can force the wire through. Don't have your hand like this, by the way. Then they'll start calling you Tyler. Not that one. I have stabbed myself. So you can force it through some cork. Just make sure that it is supported around it. And so you can make a loop on one side through the hole. Drill it if you have to, if you happen to have a fun little power drill at home, and then make a loop like that up, and needle nose pliers, because they're super handy, over. And then I usually twist around. Sometimes I'll do this last, because if the tag has a hole through it, like some of those did, I'll want to put the tag on here. If necessary, you can tie it on to the end here when you finish up. Or some people will add a secondary little like zip tie or something like that that holds the tag on. But tagging your plants is important. It is very important, because we all get forgetful. So that will be a just fine little hook right there. Ideally, you have a tag hanging on there, but yes, thank you, Patty. So now that that's on here, so this Phalaenopsis, looking it over, the active root growth right here. So I would really like those roots to attach to the bark. So I am going to put this side against plant But given that I have this open area in here, I'm going to make a little ball of moss just to kind of simulate the potting material that was in here. Put it in. Then I'm going to lay the plant with the roots growing side down on the wood like this. So now it's looking very much like that. So you can kind of, it starts to look like, oh, okay, that's what it's going to look like. So you have to just be still quite gentle because you don't want to, again, damage any of these roots. And so now I'm just going to take a little bit more sphagnum moss and just kind of drape it thusly, kind of making a little mat out of it, and lay it over just a very thin layer of going over here thusly. Always. So this is pretty damp. I've drained the rest of it out, so I'll take all my moss, throw it in a bucket with a bunch of water, and then I'll take it out of that bucket and put it on one of these guys, but upside down, so that any excess water just kind of drips off. So it's just the damp sphagnum moss, but it's not like sopping wet or anything. I just leave it be. Sometimes if I'm going to squeeze it, it's going to be because I'm trying to form it into a certain shape or around something, which can be really helpful. Because it is kind of malleable, almost like Play-Doh like that. So yeah. So sometimes I find it best to kind of look at the piece of wood and kind of gauge where I'm going to put this. So you want when you're putting you want it to hold the secure. The first wraparound that I go, I usually like to make sure it's holding the plant in place. And then subsequent wraps, I will make sure that it is holding the sphagnum moss where it wants to be. And you want just gently over there, but you see how you can still see some of the roots here. You don't want to totally cover it because it's going to start suffocating the plant. So I'm going to go up to this notch right here, kind of go over there, find the basically the crown of the plant there, and do my first wrap around down here. And then my second one is going to go straight over the middle, holding that kind of ball that was holding in there. And then my final one will go right across kind of the bottom, squeezing some of those bottom roots more towards the plant. Then I'll gently flip it over, trying not to make sure I'm doing any damage here. Find the end of the twine that I left open. And this is where it gets tricky, and every once in a while you have to start hollering to your partner. You're like, help. And there, and I'm just going to tie it off because some people will do like little knots. So not terribly perfect or anything like that, but for all intents and purposes, there you are. It has a little bit of, you can still see some of the jute twine on there. If that really bothers you, well, I think you should take a look around the world, and there's probably a few other things you could worry about a little bit more. But you know, that's, everyone's got their own, cross to bear, so to speak. But that, for all intents and purposes, then some people are of the camp that as soon as you repot something, you never, ever water it. It could bring, fungus or bacteria into the plant. I am not one of those folks. I live by faith, so to speak. And I just, honestly, I wet that down, let it hang, let it dry out just thusly, and off we go. Of course, putting this in the proper environment. So if you're a indoors grower, this is the kind of thing that you could say hang on a little hook above the sink or something, maybe with a little piece of wood behind it, just give it a little spacer or something, just so it's not, making your cupboards moldy or something like that. And whenever you look up and be like, oh, take it down, hold it under the sink for a second, set it on the drying rack, and then when you come back after having your coffee, hang it back up. That should be plenty, plus all the water around there. It just wants to be in a little bit more humid of an environment than just say on a very dry windowsill in your living room or something. So it just wants to be a little damper. Also, this is going to go great outside over the summer. I'm one of those people that believes in leaving your plants outside. By the way, if any of y'all got the hailstorm that we got down here in Selwood, talk about stress inducing when you've got half of your collection outside under shade cloth and you've got almost blueberry side hail coming down. By the way, my strawberries look terrible. Anywho, that's it. Any questions? Does anybody want me to do another one? Yeah. So mounted stuff almost every day. But that is my Zen moment. That is, me with my coffee and my hose walking around my yard being like, I've actually got a few mounted ones inside that they stay pretty damp. Especially if they've got like sphagnum moss for a few days. But then there is stuff that, yeah, I water every single day. I think it just depends on the species or the hybrid, and also like the conditions of their house, because not all houses are made equal. Yeah.
I know the answer to that. I think it's a good question for other people.
Mhm.
Is there other ways to water your plants that are going to help them during hot conditions?
Well, if the question is is there other ways to water your plants that are mounted if it's very dry, hot conditions? Yeah. So there are some plants that I will actually pretty much drop into a big tub of water. Like I've got something a little bit larger than this tote size, like a clear 5-gallon tote or whatnot, that is full of sometimes just clean water, and sometimes fertilized water, that I will actually take some plants and pretty much drop them into and kind of let them just kind of bounce around raft like in the water for a while, just so that they get totally wet. Because what you're simulating with running it under a faucet is you're simulating a quick rain shower. Putting it in a bucket or submerging it, that's a little bit more like that it's been raining for some hours. So the whole thing has gotten completely saturated. That's at least what I do. I'm sure that there are other folks that have different ways. Some people have misting systems that they run, foggers and all sorts of stuff in like greenhouse settings. But for in-house use, windowsill growing and such, either a bucket in the sink or something, or watering them down, just depending on how dry it is. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons this society exists, is you're like, hey, I've seen how you grow orchids. You wanna maybe come over and water a couple things. Some people they put things on timers, like they put like little, get quite expensive. But usually in my experience, cash talks, and you find that like whoever that you trust is nearby, that you would trust, like feeding your pet and whatnot, be like, okay, here's the deal, this is going to be a little more extensive and I'm going to pay you more, but here's the thing, I'm going to need you to water these plants, and it's not just a watering can. Yeah, that's kind of what you have to do.
Same thing, and there's trimming, by like a couple one, so we do the trips. I've been experimenting with putting more moss on mounts, that'll sustain moisture a little bit longer, which needs to be able to work. Also, if you have a mount and you're having a little like touch and putting just submerging the water, and it actually also works pretty well. Really, I don't think I could grow mounted stuff, and I just experimenting, been pretty surprised with like what orchids are doing. That's the whole thing experience, right?
Mhm. 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 Yeah. Mhm. I Yeah. So a lot of orchids can survive, one, being a little bit drier than they want for a while. Also, orchids can stand being colder than they'd like for a while, but they do not ever want to be colder than they want and wetter at the same time. If they're going to be colder, they want to be dry. And so if they're going to be warmer, that can honestly kill them no matter how wet they are. If you are going away and you have a lot of things, you don't trust your collection with anybody, and you do want to keep your damp stuff a little bit more moist, get out your arsenal of terracotta pots and get out like your trays like this, your seedling trays or whatever it is, and you can start lining up terracotta pots and putting your mounted stuff inside them. Water them really well first, put them inside the terracotta pots, and then in the tray, fill it up to pretty much the bottom of the terracotta. You can even, if it's you want a lot more moisture in there, put a couple large rocks inside the terracotta so that the plant is not sitting in water, but it will be surrounded by the terracotta that is absorbing the moisture. That will keep humidity and moisture around them so that their rate of drying out will be extremely slower. And that is more or less a self-watering type of thing that will at least keep the moisture that you've given them. Say you're going to be gone like a week, that can be done. I've never had a ton of success with like self-wicking stuff. Maybe I just did it wrong, but that's at least what I've done. In fact, some Restrepia and some pterothalids that I have, since they're warmer growing, but want to be moist all the time. Well, my wife would be very upset with me if I were keeping our house like that any more than it already is. But we're not going to talk about that. But so quite a few of my Restrepia, pterothalids, Scarfocephalum, those are growing on wood mounts inside vases, inside large glass cloches, things of that nature, or even though it's open on the top so they can get some airflow, they are surrounded by moisture. And sometimes there's even water down at the bottom after I've gotten done watering. So I'm a big fan of pea gravel at the bottom of some trays. Any last questions? Nothing? Okay. Well, it's just about 8:30. So thanks, everybody. You want to do some show and tell? Yeah. Does anybody want to do show and tell? Come on over here, and I'm going to see if we can. Is there lights behind there? No, that'll be fine. Who wants to go first? Skip.
I just brought a bunch of mountain orchids. Various. And I just brought it because it's various types of material that you can mount on. Good bark. There's a couple of pieces of driftwood, tree fern. So you can mount on just about anything. I wouldn't mount on probably walnut bark. Walnut, either English or black, can inhibit seeds from sprouting. So I wouldn't think it would be very good for roots plants, orchid plants. I don't know. That's my small one.
Thanks, good. Who's got the little purple Lalia? Is it looking? Yeah. This is the first plant I attempted to mount maybe a couple of years ago. And at first I just had a little bit of moss and it wasn't doing so well. So I actually added some more using twine, as you can see. And I've actually found this piece of bark on the Oregon coast on the beach and thought it looked cool. It's kind of covered up in moss now, but I baked it for like an hour on like 350 because I've heard like bugs and eggs can burrow in there. I also soaked it, like Tyler said, scrubbed it. And I guess I did the right thing because it's been working okay. And this actually got a HCC at the Cherry City show, my first AOS award. No, I swear it's been continually blooming for a while now. It's got another couple buds now, so very happy with this plant. I got a couple other here, Polestar, primary hybrid Coccinia, and Bergeri. Another primary is Love Knot, Walkeriana, and Synchorana. And then this is a species, Ludoboniana cerulean. It smells really good. It's not smelling right now, but this thing bloomed with 10 flowers, like late winter, early spring, and now it's blooming again with 4 flowers. Another 2 flowers just dropped, and it's got another sheath here, so it's just really impressive. That's all I brought in.
You just mentioned little white. Okay, nice. Is this Silogeny Moriana? Oh.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That group of Silogenies, they brought in from Thailand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so when we had our stand up Wakata meeting last year, it's the one the other one I got. So it's the Inyuko, whatever variety. So it's got the variegated leaves. So it's first blooming. Very nice. And one I got, I think I got this one of our meetings in lockdown. You know, we were doing the online raffles. So it's an Antonatum variety Albertizii. And I think I've got 11 spikes in it. Go to the skylight. Like Tyler was saying, if you need to make hooks, 14 gauge wire or 12 gauge for heavy clay pots. And they're like line spin pliers, super easy. Make your own hangers. Yeah. Like that.
I brought this Dendrobium versicolor in because it just everything opened up. It's got just 2 more things that haven't also exploded yet, but it puts on quite a show. But it doesn't last very long. It stay out for about a week. Farmer eye is similar to this. It's a difference with the farmer eye is the yellow lip. The yellow lip on versicolor was all the way down to the bottom. And I'm talking about and then I brought 2 cabinets. This is a cross between Perforata and Tenebrosa, and it's called the particular cross. And if you notice, the leaves and petals and sepals have that kind of reddish color that the Tenebrosa has, and yet the center has Perforata with the lines. And then I have this orchid, which is again Pacavia, but it's Pacavia crossed with Perforata, and you can see that the influence of Perforata comes in really very strongly, and these look much more like Perforata. Now I had also Pacavia cross Tenebrosa, but the flowers were all gone by the time it bloomed a little earlier. But with that other cross, it has much more reddish leaves. It has more of the Tenebrosa to it.
Thank you. Who is next?
Running into a particular orchid, but I just have a couple. This one is one that we potted up a bunch of as society. We had a flask. I think of this Dendrobium shootemanii. And it actually started blooming just a couple months after I had it in a little 2-inch pot standing in water under really bright light, which I read later wasn't what it was supposed to have. There you go. And then I had just wrapped it with this little wire stuff that holds it in place, and then you can just unwrap it and when it sat there. I just had it mounted for about a couple months. And it was like this. all the leaves turned out pretty quick and they put on a big surge of flowers, which are getting toward the end, but it's probably has, I mean, 8 or 10 brand new leaves. So I don't know what I'm doing, but you know, it's like, okay, I'll do that. The other one I brought is really go a little bit past it now. This is the Mary Trout Levine that Leonard Guines brought in '86 originally. He made it with Wyoming spotless, the Brazia, which is an albiform, and an albiform of the Caudata, which is the other parent. Most of these are, I think it's like a Mendelian double or recessive, because 3/4 of these plants have come out with spots, the mahogany spots, and 1/4 of them come out with the albiform. And this is, so I was kind of tickled to get the albiform. The other thing is most of them are between 5 and 7 inches from tip to tip. This one is 12 inches. And there's the other awarded one of this was 10.5 inches wide on a spotted form. So I'm hopeful that I can keep this going and maybe get some more growth on it to get it to be. It's a little faded now. The color is going up, kind of brownish or bronzy. But I was really tickled with that. And Leonard got a whole bunch of these and brought them to the society, and I think they were like $5 or $8 or something for these plants about a year ago.
Yeah, on the side of the highway. Yeah.
Should I go? Okay. I've got this fun thing back here that I've had for 5 years, and it never bloomed. It never bloomed, and this year, for some reason, it decided to put up 4 spikes. So Rudolphia picta. And I have Rudolphia floribunda, which looks similar. And it didn't bloom this year because I selfed it, and I'm getting seeds made. Plants made for that. Yeah, this one's pretty cool, and it's. I always thought they were kind of Cymbidium or Oncidium related, but it's actually Maxillarium is its closest cousin. And then there's a teeny tiny Collagenate over here. It's so small and cute that it's worth a look. And yeah, I think the rest sort of speak for themselves. Don't miss this crazy Dendrobium secundum here with all of its hanging roots. Thank you, Charles. Oh, and I have some bark for sales and mounts that's got this on them. They're $3. $3. I like the free. All right, who's next?
We've got a couple mounted ones up there, the striated, that's all of them were well mounted. It's first bloom, India in there. I don't know. Mounting plants are easy, you just spray them every day, right? Just get wet and that's about it. So yeah, found that these do well mounted. This one did well mounted too, so. Yeah, they're just really easy mounted in my opinion.
All right, Max, do you want to take anybody on the tour of your amazing plants?
Yeah, they're like house.
So I was fortunate enough to buy this tenebrosa from Leonard Guines last year, and there's another cross here with Alalia tenebrosa and purpurata, similar to the others that were shown.
They come out a little different, don't you?
Yeah.
Not the same, but yours darker than the one on the right.
And then I have this what's become a kind of a no ID, but it's a half surprise, hybrid Cattleya, but had trouble with that one also, but this year. And I got a couple little things that brought a little Cattleya, Liviola, and a little Dendrobium, I'm on a lake prison. Cute little flash. Shy bloom last year, but it bloomed rather nicely. Started.
No, it's a really early.
I had gotten this last year as a division, and it only had 3 roots on it, and they looked really sad. And I didn't want to break them or bend them, and I soaked it long enough, but it's still sitting up a little high out of the medium, so I think I'm gonna try and replant. I think I'm gonna mount this.
That's a mountain.
Yeah, I think
That's
it
an option there.
would be a real nice.
Maybe we'll have more rooms.
Yeah, it's a back division, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
Maybe awesome for it is a lot of them. I'm not happy.
And I think it's fragrant, I probably not right now.
There's a consensus among us going all that towards, yeah.
Oh, I did say, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, I misspoke. Yeah, it's important. Certainly.
Yes.
So I'll go next, but mainly because I just brought also kind of roasted, but for the same cross as this kind of roasted, but a much lighter version of it. So this is also from Leonard Guys. This is the rainforest cross with Makudu. So, but yeah, I got that at the show this year.
Certainly been lucky to get a lot of minutes.
Right.
And speaking of Leonard's orchids, I've gotten an ungodly amount of Leonard's orchids, including this huge chonker here, which is Cattleya gasculinea. And this is a clone of Blue Dragon, which was apparently, I have been informed, one of the first recognized blue Cattleyas, particularly this one. And it actually smells lovely. Arthur Chadwick, Chadwick and Sons Orchids just posted one of these that he was very proud of. And it had 3 beautiful blooms, and not that it's about number or anything, but though I cannot truly take credit for the incredible health and floriferousness of this plant, being that Leonard Guines only handed it over to me about 2 months ago. So I really think this is more of a testament to his growing prowess and not mine. So, but yeah, Tyler made me bring it, so there you go.
Eat your.
Yeah.